Hello again, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this Wednesday's edition of Alaska Weather on this 26th day of September 2018. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service. I'll be hosting today's show. No watches, warnings, or advisories anywhere in the state on the hazardous weather graphic here, at least for the next day or so. So moving on to the satellite imagery, you can see a lot of moisture streaming northeastward here, mostly just high stuff coming in across Kodiak Island, back in across Bristol Bay, a lot of thick cirrus, thickening and lowering, with rain actually just to the south here, the main rain producing area right in there. That'll be lifting northward this evening and comes northward and then takes off to the east here, and a fair amount of precipitation fell across the central and southern southeast coast over the last 24 hours, with some pretty significant amounts falling even during the daytime hours, heaviest over the central and southern locations, drying out back to the north though, and a little bit of clearing occurring, but increasing high clouds here, Kenai Peninsula, Cook Inlet, and interior dry. There were some isolated showers here west of Eagle, and then back with this mess here up toward the north coast. Kind of a weak trough right through there, swinging in on the north side of one southwest flow. That kicked the winds up to about 25 miles an hour in gusts at Point Lay, back down to about Cape Lisburne. And precipitation was really very light and just about non-measurable. Clear skies, central Arctic coast this afternoon, and then some fog over toward the east side seemed to be dissipating this afternoon. A little bit of a break in between this mess coming up from the southwest, right through here from the Pribilofs down the eastern Aleutians. Next front pushing eastward, bringing a little bit of wind, gusts 20, 30 miles an hour at AKwx, but really not much of a rain producer yet. Maybe a narrow band with the main frontal boundary back to the west of AKwx, then breaking out again towards Shemya. You can see this whole area appears to be slowly weakening and not really moving eastward too fast, mostly streaming on up to the north. On the chart today, here's a warm front right through here. Has yet to bring rain, maybe on the southwest Kodiak Island or southern island. Sitka might be seeing some rain currently, but hasn't made it up to the state airport yet. And then this back just mostly south of the Alaska Peninsula. A lot of, as I mentioned, cirrus into Bristol Bay. Some clearing here across southern Alaska, increasing high clouds along the south, the Kenai Peninsula. Pretty good high pressure center, 1,031 millibars up here, but a lot of low level moisture trapped under that, mostly cloudy skies. Real isolated showers, as I mentioned, just west of Eagle, and some rain and snow showers up there in the western Brooks Range. And then that southwest flow keeping the temperatures in the 40s. Therefore, some light, very light rain, fog for the western Arctic coast, again, mostly from Point Lay back down toward Cape Lisburne. And then the Tin City also reporting some light rain showers there, but dry for St. Lawrence Island. And the moisture of this front trying to get into the AKwx area. And it looks like small craft advisory level winds with that, and that's about it. And over the southeast coast here, we had the stationary front slowly dropping southward a little bit there, one wave actually kicking off to the east, and that brought about 1.17 inches of precipitation to Klawock. And that was in the 12-hour period ending at 3 p.m. this afternoon. Otherwise, by contrast, Heidelberg just had about 3 or 4/100ths of an inch of precipitation, while Annette and I believe Petersburg both picked up roughly 1/2 inch of rain fall, and Cake and Juneau had about 1/3 of an inch. So this is definitely a much more wetter system than at least this warm front initially is here, or the one out to the west. But that'll change. The southwest flow coming northward here, building high pressure over the northeast Pacific, both at the surface and aloft, is going to push this moisture up across Kodiak Island this evening, into southern Cook Inlet and Kenai Peninsula tonight, and actually expand westward into eastern Bristol Bay area. Otherwise, fair, high pressure controlling the northern interior, variably to mostly cloudy skies. Be some areas of clearing. Easterly flow here. I wouldn't be surprised if I actually start seeing some clearing showing up over the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, even along the coastline. A break here, fog, low clouds, eastern Aleutians, light winds, dry Pribilofs. And then this front slowly edging some areas of light rain and fog. And rather breezy conditions, nothing too serious into the central Aleutian areas. Much stronger northwest winds now starting to kick in late tonight into the far western Aleutians. Could see gusts of 50 miles an hour there, areas west of Kiska Island. Isolated showers, snow or rain, very light, so it really won't matter what form it's in. Won't even be probably noticeable. And then for tomorrow, this front, or actually over the Panhandle tonight, I kind of went too far. Let me back it up one. This thing slides off mostly to the east and to the south, so rain changing to showers, ending to the north with clearing, and that'll extend back into the Copper River Basin and into the old central interior, Tanana Valley, and those areas. Now we'll go into forecast for tomorrow, and that bulk of moisture slides up to the northeast across all southern Alaska for rain. Hopefully, little model differences on the timing and how far north the rain goes. Looks like a pretty good chance right up in across southern Alaska, Copper River Basin, spilling back into the northern Panhandle tomorrow afternoon, possibly. Look for possible clearing down south. Definitely a much drier day coming up down there than what you saw today. Isolated snow showers possible along the Arctic coast, maybe some patchy fog, otherwise dry up through the interior here. Winds easterly starting to increase, and we'll see this front continues to try to push some more moisture eastward, and we'll see that makes a pretty good jog to the east here. Strong southeast flow. You can see quite a gradient now across western Alaska from the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island. Looks good for maybe gusts 40, 50 miles an hour across the peninsula in the channel areas like Cold Bay. Also a big increase in the winds. Could be gale force here for the southwest coast up to St. Lawrence Island, and also increasing winds for the western Arctic coast as well as the northwest interior. Easterlies starting to pick up on Friday here through the central interior. Low clouds, fog, light winds for the Arctic coast, and a few showers along this trough from south central Alaska. It could slip on in and keep a few showers in the Panhandle. It's mostly cloudy skies. General area rain back to the west across the northern Kuskokwim Valley out to southern Norton Sound. Low temperatures for tonight, mid to upper 40s for the Panhandle. Looks like it'll be warmest in the south, a little cooler in the north, but really not that much of a contrast. 20s, Copper River Basin to lower 30s over the eastern interior. Anywhere from 20 to 30 degrees over the northeast interior, warmer back to the west, 30s to lower 40s to upper 40s over the Alaska Peninsula. Highs for tomorrow afternoon, 55 to 60 or 61 for the peninsula here. Pretty warm air aloft, same thing for the Panhandle. A lot drier conditions, sunshine, could see lower 60s possibly in the southern areas. A little or near or a little above freezing on the eastern Arctic coast, otherwise 40s and 50s, maybe to mid 50s over the remainder of the interior. And for the lows the following morning, down to just a little under 20 degrees through the Brooks Range. Otherwise, upper 20s out along the Arctic coast. Mid 30s warm into near 40 for Kotzebue. And upper 40s, lower 50s for the Alaska Peninsula. And then the highs the following day, you can see upper 60s there around King Salmon. And even maybe lower 60s here, south central Alaska. And 60s on the north side of the Alaska Peninsula all the way back to about Nelson Lagoon. Otherwise, 50s, lower 60s for the southeast coast. And after the break, or actually we'll just move right into the flying weather.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
First flying weather graphic showing IFR out here over the western central Bering Sea. Marginal VFR with some IFR up to the southwest coast, and IFR streaming northward here. That moisture coming up from the south, initially streaming off to the east, but this whole area be shifting northward throughout the day on Thursday. And by the afternoon, should see some IFR up into south central Alaska and eventually into the Copper River Basin as well as the northern Panhandle. Conditions deteriorating, ceilings visibility is coming down the entire day here in the south. Not too bad, a little bit of marginal VFR possible in the central interior, marginal VFR Arctic coast. Of course, a lot of IFR and marginal VFR for the Aleutians and the Bering Sea. And then for Thursday morning, about the same here, IFR down to the south. We've got some IFR now lifting up into the central interior, north central interior up to the Brooks Range there. And another batch IFR out here over the Bering Sea. And then going to the Friday afternoon forecast. Marginal VFR in over the Panhandle, up into the Copper River Basin, but improving. VFR coming into the picture here, south central Alaska, and all the way up into the interior there until you get north of the Brooks Range. Marginal VFR on out to the Arctic coast. IFR to marginal conditions around Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay, up about to Nunivak Island. Pribilofs and much of the Aleutians breaking out to marginal here from Amchitka out to Attu Island. But the Bering and the central and southern Bering Sea, pretty much IFR. And for the passes tomorrow, Anaktuvik, IFR becoming marginal in the afternoon. That same forecast also good for Adigan, starting out IFR, then gradually becoming marginal throughout the day. Lake Clark and Merrill starting out VFR, and then conditions coming down. I think it'll just go to marginal VFR by afternoon, or during the afternoon toward evening. Rainy, same trend. It's a little longer there. Stay VFR longer into the day. That'll be in the latter part of the afternoon. You start seeing some marginal VFR possibly showing up as the ceilings drop low enough. Windy though, you should be VFR all day long. And for Isabel, marginal VFR for Isabel Pass. And then Mentasta, VFR trending toward marginal in the late part of the afternoon. And that's going to be mostly on the southern entrance, otherwise staying VFR. And for Tanita, same downward trend, VFR to start, trending toward marginal into the afternoon toward evening. Portage, marginal VFR becoming IFR. And for Chilkoot and White, marginal becoming IFR late in the day. And for the freezing levels, 2,000 feet, kind of a cool air mass dropping southward here, colliding with the northward bound warmer air mass, and the two come together and they take a turn to the east and across the Panhandle. Quite a gradient there across the southeast coast, 4,000 feet, Lincoln Glacier Bay to 12,000 feet over Dixon Entrance. Of course, that's where the jet stream's the strongest, back in toward Kodiak Island. Not much of a gradient here over the Bering Sea. And looking at icing, a band out here of light to very isolated moderate rime icing, above about 5,000 feet here, pushing across from the eastern Aleutians, about Atka over to just about Nikolsky in that area. More widespread icing, that moisture coming northward. And this will be increasing throughout the day with, by late afternoon into tomorrow evening, considerable moderate eastern Kenai Peninsula on up into the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, Talkeetnas, and that'll be starting to spread in on the light side to the north coast of the Panhandle. And upper level wind flow charts, strong jet south to north here, high pressure building, so that area of moisture initially cutting to the east to the south over the Gulf of Alaska is going to be bulging northward there, but they'll be breaking also. You can see 130 knots southerly jet here coming over the top, about 120, diminishing to 90 knots, high pressure building over the northwest interior areas. Big trough out here to the west, 9,000 feet, westerlies 30, 35 into the southern Panhandle, and southerlies at about 35. These winds are increasing. These kind of coming north but diminishing. Looks like tomorrow just 15 knots along the North Gulf Coast. Pretty light over the eastern central interior, and 15 to 30 here along the southwest coast to the northern Bering Sea, but much stronger winds approaching the Alaska Peninsula. And at 3,000 feet, about the same pattern here, ridging up over the eastern and northern interior, southeast 25 knots, lighter over the Panhandle, and we're looking at about 45 across the Alaska Peninsula. And turbulence, Kodiak Island up into the Kenai Peninsula, occasional light to moderate chop, but heaviest out there over the western Aleutians, occasional moderate chop below about 5,000 feet.
Floating hundreds of miles from Earth, astronauts get a unique perspective of our planet. While they might recognize landmarks, space is the only place they can see the very edge of our planet's atmosphere.
From orbit, particularly looking at the horizon, did bring to mind how thin the atmosphere is. It's like an onion skin around this great big ball of the Earth.
This uppermost layer of Earth's atmosphere, the ionosphere, also overlaps with the very beginning of space. It's the job of NASA's new mission GOLD, the Global Scale Observations of the Limmendisk Instrument, to study this region, a region that isn't just for astronauts to explore, but that affects humans every day down on the ground. For one thing, this layer of the upper atmosphere helps protect us from harmful radiation and energy emanating from the sun. But in our modern society, it does so much more. It affects the smartphone that sits in your pocket and the radio waves that guide our airplanes. The ionosphere is a crucial layer of the atmosphere through which our communications and GPS signals travel. And when this region changes, it impacts those communication signals. Changes can occur above this region from the sun's activity, also known as space weather. Changes can also occur below from Earth's weather, such as hurricanes and wind patterns. Gold connects the dots between how space weather and Earth's weather shape the upper reaches of the atmosphere. But this region isn't easy to study. The ionosphere spans roughly 60 to 400 miles from Earth's surface, which is too high for aircraft and scientific balloons, and the lower regions are too low to easily study with satellites. What are attainable, however, are the swaths of red and green light shining out from the upper atmosphere. Formed when the sun's rays hit atmospheric molecules, this light, named airglow, comes from green and red bands of glowing gas. Some of the airglow is invisible to our eyes, shining in infrared and ultraviolet light, which can only be seen with scientific instrumentation. Taking advantage of our planet's natural glow is gold. The gold instrument, which is about the size of a mini-fridge, is hitching a ride on a commercial communication satellite, SES-14. The satellite's orbit lies 22,000 miles above Earth, where it can record images in ultraviolet light to monitor changes in airglow across the globe. These images give information on the temperature, density, and composition of particles in the upper atmosphere. Gold collects these observations faster than any mission has ever done before. It captures an image of Earth's entire disk every 30 minutes, allowing scientists to see how the upper atmosphere evolves throughout the day. Gold joins a host of missions studying the very nature of space, around Earth, the Sun, and planets. As NASA ventures farther and farther from home, knowing the nature of space itself is crucial for our journey to understand our solar system and beyond.
There's a new class of chemical compounds impacting the Earth's ozone layer and raising concerns among some scientists. But a new NASA analysis indicates stratospheric ozone could actually be impacted more by climate change and the continued release of already banned chemicals. The Earth's ozone hole is showing signs of recovery, decades after the landmark agreement called the Montreal Protocol that banned many chemical compounds harmful to the ozone layer.
So we know the Montreal Protocol was a huge success. This was signed in the late 1980s when scientists and policymakers from around the world gathered together to try to save the ozone layer.
The chemicals they regulated persist in the atmosphere for many decades. They thin the ozone layer and they create a seasonal hole over Antarctica. They basically take away part of our planet's natural sunscreen, and that increases the risk of skin cancer and damage to plants.
Scientists have projected the ozone hole could disappear almost completely by about 2075, but several factors could delay that recovery.
There are some industrial compounds that are not banned by the Montreal Protocol, but as they enter the atmosphere, they will also hurt the ozone layer.
But the unregulated compounds have a short lifespan in the atmosphere, unlike the chlorofluorocarbons that were originally regulated. So they have a short-lived impact on ozone, and we don't think they'll delay recovery by more than a few years.
We projected by 2050, more than half of the ozone-depleting compounds in the atmosphere will come from long-lived substances banned by the protocol.
Because these compounds stay in the air for such a long time compared to the unregulated, short-lived compounds, they will have a disproportionate and lingering impact on ozone. So any non-compliance with the protocol can have significant consequences.
And the really big uncertainty in ozone layer recovery is climate change. There are many naturally produced ozone-depleting substances that are emitted by the oceans. And as the oceans continue to warm due to climate change, those emissions will increase, and that will further delay ozone recovery.
Scientists want to better understand how climate change will affect ozone recovery.
This is a hard problem. As a scientific community, we need to work on this major issue. We now have a powerful new tool to simulate atmosphere and its interaction with land and ocean to study this issue. And that's what we're going to do.
How can you see the atmosphere? The answer is blowing in the wind. Tiny particles known as aerosols are carried by the air around the globe. This visualization uses data from NASA satellites combined with our knowledge of physics and meteorology to track 3 aerosols: dust, smoke, and sea salt. Sea salt, shown here in blue, is picked up by winds passing over the ocean. As tropical storms and hurricanes form, the salt particles are concentrated into the spiraling shape we all recognize. With their movements, we can follow the formation of Hurricane Irma and see the dust from the Sahara, shown in tan, get washed out of the storm center by the rain. Advances in computing speed allow scientists to include more details of these physical processes in their simulations of how the aerosols interact with the storm systems. The increased resolution of the computer simulation is apparent in fine details like the hurricane bands spiraling counterclockwise. Computer simulations let us see how different processes fit together and evolve as a system. By using mathematical models to represent nature, we can separate the system into component parts and better understand the underlying physics of each. Today's research improves next year's weather forecasting ability. Hurricane Ophelia was very unusual. It headed northeast, pulling in Saharan dust and smoke from wildfires in Portugal, carrying both to Ireland and the UK. This aerosol interaction was very different from other storms of the season. As computing speed continues to increase, scientists will be able to bring more scientific details into the simulations, giving us a deeper understanding of our home planet.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at today's sea ice analysis. This zone right through here, up north of the coast, really not a lot of change over the last day or so, and forecast to continually slowly melt for the next 5 or 6 days. New ice forming up here, the main ice pack up here to the north, the entire stretch of the way there, and that's also forecast to continue for the next 5 or 6 days. Coastal water forecast. West winds 10 to 15 on the south coast, southeast 15 to 20 on the north coast, with those seas up to 7 feet. And kind of a variable wind pattern over the inside waters at 10 knots with pretty slight seas. And then for Friday, north 20 knots, central southern inside waters, Lincoln Glacier Bay, north 25, good for small craft advisories. Otherwise, northerlies 15 to 20 with the strongest winds on the south coast, seas 5 to 6 feet, very light easterlies, but 8-foot seas make that a small craft advisory. And for the North Gulf Coast, east winds 30, increasing to 30 knots here as you approach the Barren Islands. Then they're up to 40 knots in the Barren Island zone. Prince William Sound, northeast 20, seas 4 feet. Cook Inlet, south of the Forelands into Kemishak Bay, northeast at 30 with 9 to 10-foot seas. North of the Forelands, northeast 20, 4-foot seas. Those drop down to just 10 knots on Friday. 20-knot winds, southern Cook Inlet, Kemishak Bay. Winds coming down to 15 for the Barren Islands, northeast 15 for the North Gulf Coast. These seas still at 9 feet and north at 10 for Prince William Sound. Kodiak Island, Shelikof Strait looking at northeast tomorrow. Gale force, minimum gales, 35 knots, seas up to 12 feet. South winds, 30 knots here, east side of Kodiak all the way to Castle Cape with seas at 15 feet. North 20 knots, Castle Cape to Cape Sarachev with 13-foot seas. Northeast 20 on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula, and Bristol Bay northeast 25 with 7-foot seas. Those become east 30 knots on Friday for the bay, and Alaska Peninsula east at 30 to 35 knots. Gale force winds on the north side, seas up to 11 feet. Northeast come down to 25 for Shelikof Strait, southeast 20 on the east side of Kodiak with those seas up to 11 feet, otherwise 15 to 16 feet on the Pacific side of the peninsula. Way out west for tomorrow, west winds 35 knots out over the Aleutians there. The western Aleutians, gale force winds on the backside of that low and the tighter gradient. 30 knots here out of the west, 14-foot seas over to about Adak. Then they swing around to the south, 30 knots, 10 to 15-foot seas. and then winds drop off to east-southeast or east-northeast of 15 for Alaska Island. Next day, though, those pick up southeast or east-southeast at about 30 knots, northwest behind that front at 15, and then westerlies 20 to 25 for the central Aleutians, increase to 25, and then northwest 30 for the western zone. And for the Pribilofs tomorrow, southeast at 20, seas 7 feet, northeast 20 south of Nunivak Island, become east on the north side across St. Matthew Island, east winds 25 knots for both St. Lawrence Island and Norton Sound. And then those pick up even more on Friday with a tightening gradient continuing, east 30 knots, Norton Sound right across St. Lawrence Island, southeast 30 to 35 knots here for the southwest coast, seas 14 feet, 30 knot winds for St. Matthew Island, small craft advisories for the Pribilofs, east 25, 10, 12 foot seas. West winds 10 to as high as 20 knots over toward demarcation point. Tomorrow, those seas up to 6 feet. Otherwise, the central coast fairly light, west 10, 3 foot seas. Same thing on the west side, except out of the southeast. Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort south at 10, and then the Chukchi Sea east at 15. For Friday, 25 knot winds show up here all across the west side from Wales all the way up to, well, at least a Point Lay. Then they start dropping off with just east at 10 on the central coast. North 10 on the east side, over toward demarcation point northwest at 15 with 5 foot seas. And for tonight, big high pressure area up there, fairly strong actually this time of the year, in the lower 1030s, a lot of trapped low level moisture, isolated rain or snow showers possible, very light, isolated, probably more mist than hit, and then some clearing here over southern Alaska, but rain spreading northward of that warm front into Kodiak Island, southern Cook Inlet, rain diminishing over the Panhandle, and then that front edge is eastward. Wet day tomorrow, southern Alaska, maybe into the northern Panhandle, possibly sunshine in the south, fair in the north, and the outlook for Friday, much tighter gradients, southeast winds on the increase, again, some areas of gale force winds, rains along the Alaska Peninsula, could be moderate at times, kind of damp for Kodiak, sunshine, eastern interior, isolated showers in the Panhandle. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.